And the mother just wants to take that pain away, right? With no thought for themselves. This is what a bodhisattva is like. A bodhisattva sees the suffering of beings and has to do something about it. And so then they begin to cultivate compassion, or they continue to cultivate the compassion that they've already cultivated. And of course, there are benefits to this to the individual practitioner. As motivation for us, I'm going to describe a few of these. People, first of all, it's an excellent motivation for Dharma practice, but as we develop compassion, we're better able to sleep and avoid bad dreams. In fact, there are psychologists now. I study psychology, by the way, at the University of the West. There are psychologists now who, as therapy for their clients who are having trouble sleeping or who are experiencing a lot of nightmares and frustrating dreams, they tell them to meditate on compassion. And this meditation on compassion seems to alleviate their sleeping trouble. So if you're having problems sleeping, start meditating on compassion. It also helps us develop patience. So when we find ourselves in frustrating situations, instead of immediately giving into anger, we're able to remain calm. Compassion helps us to remain calm. It helps us to avoid suffering, not only for ourselves, but avoid causing suffering for others. And if anger does arise, though, it goes away fairly quickly. I'll tell you a story. I told this, I teach a meditation class at UFA, and I'm 39 years old now. When I was 19 years old, I was living at home and I was in college. My sister, one of my sisters, is a year and a half older than me. And she was also living at home. We were living together with our parents and we were both studying in college. Well, one night she was watching television and I went downstairs to use the computer. And I waited till the last minute to write one of my research papers. It was due the next day. It was Sunday night and it was due Monday morning. So I was in a panic and really frustrated. So I started writing and I asked my sister to please turn off the television. And she said, no, I was here first. So then I said, okay. So I typed for a while, but I started to boil. I was getting frustrated. And then I said, please turn off the TV. She said, no. And then finally, long story short, I got so angry. My face was bright red. Spit was flying out of my mouth. I was screaming at her. I jumped up. I hit the TV so hard I hurt my hand. I even grabbed her by the shoulders and I pushed her up against the wall. This is how angry I got. Now this surprises people because they see this, this nice monk with his shaved head and his robe sitting up here. You know, this guy, how did he become a monk? But I got really, really angry. I came this close to hitting my own sister. That's how angry I got, over something really stupid. Obviously, at that time in my life, I was really frustrated and unhappy. I recognized that. I was taking it out on her. So I was screaming at her. My mother came downstairs and she's like, okay, you need to calm down. And I told her to shut up, and I ran out of the house and I jumped in the car and I drove away. I drove to the university and I was sitting in the parking lot and I was shaking. My body was shaking from the adrenaline, from the energy of the anger. And I thought, what just happened to me? Now by this time I was already technically Buddhist. I first went for refuge when I was 17 years old, but I hadn't really learned much of the Dharma yet. I grew up in a small town. There were no Buddhist temples or teachers or anything. But now it's 20 years later, and not too long ago my sister and I were sitting and talking about this. She doesn't remember it. I do very clearly. I asked her if she remembered it. She said no, but she did say this. She said, I can tell you've changed. And I think that Buddhism has been part of that change. This is what my sister has said to me. So I'm a real-life example. I'm not a great bodhisattva, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm a real-life example of how the Dharma can change your life. And so I still get frustrated. I still get angry sometimes, and sometimes it's over really stupid things. But I've noticed that when the anger comes up, I recognize it. Usually I recognize it. And it doesn't get so bad. It doesn't overwhelm me. I don't get carried away by it, and I'm able to get over it much more quickly. So the Dharma can be a real benefit. So these are the benefits of compassion. But then we talk about ultimate bodhicitta. So again, Compassion is called relative bodhicitta. Basically, they're the same thing. But then there's ultimate bodhicitta. This is the other side of the coin. This is wisdom. You've heard of the 6 perfections? This is the perfection of wisdom. So a bodhisattva has perfect bodhicitta. They have perfect compassion and perfect wisdom. The two go hand in hand. So when we talk about what wisdom is, we're talking about insight into emptiness. We chant the Heart Sutra regularly, right? The Heart Sutra says things like, no suffering but no end of suffering, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, and so on. This is all talking about emptiness. Of course, I have eyes, I have ears, I have a nose and a tongue. People look at that and they go, what? This sutra's crazy. This doesn't make any sense. Logically, it doesn't look like it makes sense. But what the sutra is referring to really begins with impermanence. It is the truth that things exist, they come together because of causes and conditions. This table, for example, I don't know, is it plastic? It's plastic. So somebody had to make the plastic. Somebody had to dig the metal. Okay, let me try that again. So somebody had to make this plastic. Someone had to dig the metal out of the earth and then process it and turn it into the legs and the screws. Then there's probably glue. Someone also had to design it. All of these different elements had to come together just to make this one table. So the Buddha taught that everything is actually a collection of parts. And when the causes and conditions that brought these things, that bring things together, when these causes and conditions change enough, then things fall apart. Eventually, this table will not exist. The same thing is true for us. I am here because my parents met and they got married and they had children. And if you go back far enough, you see, well, then my grandparents met and they had children, right? We can never find the first cause. And we could spend 100 years sitting and trying to just come up with all the causes and conditions that had to come together in order for me to be sitting here right now. It's not just physical causes and conditions. There are situations as well, decisions that I had to make. Various causes and conditions that influenced me to become a monk and to come to California. We can never find all of these causes and conditions. So this is what the Buddha is referring to when he's talking about impermanence. Things come together because of causes and conditions, and then eventually they come apart. Emptiness takes this a step further. There was an Indian Buddhist master named Nagarjuna, and he looked at these teachings on impermanence and he said, well, it's not quite that simple. So we think that this table is actually fixed and completely solid. We think that this table right now is not changing. But that's not true. That's not correct. In fact, this table is slowly breaking down. It's exposed to the elements, heat and cold and moisture, dry air, the wind, everything. This building, it's exposed to the elements, and eventually it needs repairs, right? We're trying to fix it up. So things are, in fact, constantly changing. In every moment, everything is constantly changing. We just don't necessarily see the change. These flowers are changing much more quickly. In a few days, they'll wilt, and they'll start to turn brown, right, and dry up. This table is changing much more slowly. So we don't see the change, and so we mistakenly think that it's this fixed and solid and unchanging thing. So Nagarjuna said, though, no, it's actually changing in every moment. So when I look at this and I say, table, this is a table, conventionally that's true. In order for us to be able to communicate, we have to agree that this is a table. It would be really difficult if every time we wanted something, if I asked you, could you get me that object that we temporarily call a table? We can't talk that way. It doesn't work. But that's really what we're talking about. So in every moment, it's constantly changing. So in fact, when I say this is a table, in the next moment, it's already slightly different than the thing that I call the table. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about emptiness. But we grab onto these concepts of my body, my computer, my friend, this building, and we try to hold on to them. But inevitably, things change. It's much easier to see with ourselves. I was joking at UPOP a while ago. I woke up in the morning and I noticed several days in a row my back was kind of stiff, my neck was sore, my knees ached a little bit. I'm only 39 years old, right? So I stood up and I had to kind of stretch before I started the day. And then I thought, you know, this is happening a lot more often these days. It's getting harder to get out of bed. I swear, I was 18 just yesterday. Okay? But we can see this change within ourselves a little bit more clearly. But then we try to hang on to our youth, don't we? We don't want to let it go. We don't like that change. Especially painful change, physically painful change. We don't like that change, so we try to hold on to it. But inevitably, we get hit in the head with impermanence. We get hit in the head with the frailty, the weakness of our own bodies. And we get upset. We get angry and depressed. This is where our suffering comes from, because we don't have wisdom. This is where our negative emotions come from.